Alright, cool. As long as this is working. This is the second stage of my project to build a really weird power test box. That's not it. That's not it either. And this is kind of it. So this is what I'm going for. It's a box for testing power supplies. Well, it's half of a set of boxes for testing power supplies. Basically, it's just a way of having tap points for a line voltage power supply. And if you want to catch up on that, you can see the previous live stream of this, which was extremely long and boring, on my YouTube channel, Scott.extras, and or you'll be able to see an edited version of this entire project if you don't have the patience to sit through all of this. And if you don't, I really couldn't blame you. So, I've cut all the holes in this box for mounting the various components, and in the last episode, or whatever you want to call it, I made this box, which is just a remote switch for the whole thing, which has a circuit breaker and power switch and an indicator that flashes to show you when it's on. And previously I showed this, which is both sort of a diagram of how it's all put together, but it's also the layout for this box, and it is the template for this transparency, which will go on top of the box in order to label all the connections and whatnot. And all these circles will be replaced with components, so you won't see all these giant circles, and this orange border is just for aiding with placement. So yeah, I guess the next step in this is to put this thing onto this thing in a way that keeps it nice and lined up with all the holes beneath it. Which I figure if I start with this corner, of course it's not really transparent, so this is kind of a bitch. I know I'm gonna fuck this up, by the way. There's every chance this is not gonna be lined up nicely when I'm done with it. And it doesn't have to be perfect because all the holes are bigger than these circles, so it's not like you'd really notice, but I want all these lines going straight down the middle of each of the components. Let's see. I think I got that pretty good. And obviously I'm going to cut off the excess around the edges as well as cut out the holes for the components after I get this placed. Ah, screw it. Yeah, that actually... was not perfect, but I think that'll do the trick. Yeah, you know what, that's not coming back up, so it's pretty well lined up. But since this thing's just for my own amusement, I guess close enough is fine with me. Oh wow. Now I just realized I've made a grievous error. Fuck. I drilled the hole in the wrong spot. That hole is supposed to be there for the LED enable and disable switch. That hole is entirely pointless and is just ugly. I must have had it upside down when I did that last hole. Shit. Well, I guess I'll just kind of leave it there under this transparency and just say fuck it, and then drill a new hole where it's supposed to be. Ah well. Good thing this isn't like something I'm trying to sell or get a Kickstarter going for. That's at least something. Sorry, I'm just fucking with my mic. Which isn't... okay. Well, anyway, this is getting off to a great start. So that hole is supposed to accommodate this toggle switch, which is going to be there ultimately. Well, let me put a pilot hole in place. Actually, let me switch to another camera for your viewing pleasure. Yeah, all this hole drilling has been a giant catastrophe, mostly due to my own sort of haste and lack of attentiveness. Because I also drilled one of these holes way too big, and I'm going to have to use washers to actually mount the component, which is, again, not the most professional and sexy way of doing things, but functional. Kind of just eyeballed that based on the other hole, which, by my track record, probably I shouldn't be eyeballing this shit, but yeah, that was the right size. I just gotta take a little more off on the... There we go. Oh, no, can go one size larger. Do this from the top. Wow, this is already off to a rough start. Holy shit. Now I'm just being really paranoid about going too large. Yeah, there we go. Sticks through nicely. And it did fuck up the area around the hole with the transparency, but that's okay because this thing's going to have a very large surround to it, which is right here, so that's going to cover up any blemishes or any messed upness. I think that's the word. Alright, so great. Now to cut off all this excess shit and get those holes cut out. That is a job for an X-Acto knife, and that is also a job for a piece of cardboard that I don't have handy, so I'm getting cardboard. Shit, do I have a nice just flat piece of cardboard? This will do. This hasn't been a precision operation thus far, so I guess I'm fine with whatever. And X-Acto knives, which I did not bring out. Wonderful. Oh, I got those too. See, this is going to be much better when I edit it. And I can get rid of all the mistakes and look like a fucking genius. I'm just kidding. I'm not going to look like a genius, nor am I going to edit out the mistakes. Okay, good old X-Acto knife set. Let's hope this blade is still sharp. It feels reasonably sharp. Alright, I guess I'll start with trimming the edge off here. This is probably as exciting as watching paint dry, but it needs to be done. Fortunately, this transparency, which isn't transparent, is very thin, so this is extremely easy to cut. I don't know if this was the best way to do it. I mean, I was going to pre-cut it at first, but then I figured if I don't cut it, if I pre-cut it to the size of the box, and then I didn't line it up perfectly, or the cuts weren't perfectly straight, it was either the edges were going to look crooked or the component holes were going to look crooked. I need a proper cutting mat, because it kind of wanders when it digs into the cardboard and hits one of the ribs, but that shouldn't be my excuse for poor arts and crafts capabilities, but there you go. Pretty sure I failed kindergarten, so take that for what it's worth. I know for a fact I failed high school French on more than one occasion. I really drove my French teachers crazy. We had to come up with our own French names. And the teacher wanted me to be Sebastian. Because I don't know, I guess there's no Scott in French. And so I said, no, I want to be Jacques. She said, okay, that's fine. And then on every quiz and test thereafter, I wrote my name as Jacques Strap. I think I spelled it differently, like Strop. I don't know. Anyway, Jacques Strap. It was a really dumb joke. But it annoyed the hell out of the teacher because she kept telling me not to do that, and I kept doing that. And eventually she refused to grade any paper on which I put Jacques Strap, on the basis that's not the name I was given, and therefore that person doesn't exist and can't submit papers. But I kept doing it anyway because I was really bad at French, so it didn't really matter if she failed me. Because of that reason, I probably would have failed anyway. But the thing is, I actually like French. I like the language, I like France well enough. It was just me being obstinate, and also not a great student, to be honest. Mainly for lack of trying. Actually, let me make sure this is really well pressed down around the holes so I don't pull on it. Yeah, I guess that'll do. This is my least favorite part of any project. Usually I don't bother with, I was going to say with nice case designs, but I wouldn't necessarily call this nice. It's just a case design. I figure it's better than putting Dymo labels below all the switches, or just, well, my usual MO would actually just be me assuming I knew what all the switches and buttons did, and not labeling anything. But since I'm going to be using this for a future set of YouTube videos where I review... Oh my god. Why can't I... Well, okay, it's not like I can't cut things, it's that the edges of this hole are kind of rough and the knife keeps catching in them. So I'm just going to go like kind of approximately, because this all gets covered by the components anyway. But this box and another low voltage companion box are going to be used to test variable voltage power supplies. Not like the benchtop expensive fancy type, but like the wall wart style, where you can select any one of like 5 or 6 different voltages, you know, 3.3, 5, 9, 12, I don't know, maybe something else. Depends how fancy they get. But the completely non-fancy type of power supplies that you could get from like Radio Shack back in the day. In fact, I have a couple of old Radio Shack ones I want to test also as a basis of comparison. And at least one of which is transformer based rather than being a switch mode power supply. And I also got another just off-brand, really old, I'm just going to cut an X in this one, really old power supply which is also transformer based. So it'll be fun to compare new versus old and a variety of new switch mode power supplies, just to see what you're best off with. Because my problem is I always go to Amazon and I'm like, okay, I need a variable voltage power supply, and Amazon's like, oh, here's like 10 of them and they all have 4.5, 5-ish stars, somewhere in that range. I'm like, you know what, there's no way like they're all excellent. Because the fact of the matter is, most people buy them and they're just like, oh yeah, this operates my device, 5 stars. Or they're paid reviewers, I mean, who knows, I don't want to make any accusations. But they're not going to test like ripple, they're not going to test accuracy for voltage, and they're probably not going to stress it out to its max amperage, or even over its max amperage, just to see if it blows up or goes on fire. All of which I'm interested in testing, both for my own benefit and to like help the community of people who might need such things. I'm cutting these very sloppily because the knife keeps digging in around the edges, and you'll see it doesn't matter if these are sloppy at all, because the boundary of the component's going to completely cover whatever I cut there. So it can be pretty sloppy. I mean, I could just cut an X in it and just fold it down, but I'm just worried that then when I go to screw on the nut on the back, it's going to sort of twist everything I cut out and just pull on the top and just cause a whole problem, cause it to wrinkle up on top. So, but anyway, that's the whole point of this project. And of course, building these test boxes is completely unnecessary. I'm only doing it for fun. I could just, I mean, the idea here, because you probably didn't see the last video or necessarily care, but the idea is that there are going to be banana sockets here, 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 all these yellow holes. And you're going to be able to disconnect this connection. That's a stupid way of phrasing it, but you know what I mean. Disconnect this connection here that's going to be inside the box, and instead go outside the box with jumpers to a very accurate ammeter. And likewise, voltmeter if you go on these, between these two poles. And I also will use the box in the future, probably for testing other rando projects that involve line voltages. It's easier to cut from the top. I don't know why I have to go from the bottom. Yeah, this is much easier to cut from the top. I don't know why I was doing it the other way. Wow. Okay, well, I'm stupid. This is only the second project ever that I've used this general style of box making, of label making. Because like I said, I usually just would not bother. And the last time I did this was 2015 or 16, maybe in 14, I don't know. So, nipples. So this is all kind of experimental. I mean, in my experience, if you do, you know, take your time with it and do it more carefully than I've done it, these are just like full sheet labels that are, I guess, semi-transparent. Transparent would work just as well, or opaque if you don't like the color of the box underneath it. And I just printed this out on an inkjet printer, and well, here we are. And it was actually really easy to get it scaled. Like, I've had problems with printers where I did this in Photoshop, which is the wrong program to do it in probably, but whatever. Anyway, in Photoshop, obviously I scaled it by inches. Yes, instead of millimeters and centimeters, in inches. And I've had issues before where certain printers don't print to the proper scale. Like, even if you have the right DPI set, it'll be off by just a little bit, like a fractional amount. Like if you tell Photoshop it's going to be 8 inches wide, it prints it like 8.25 inches wide or 7.75 inches wide, and it's just like slightly off of where you need it to be. But this is actually has printed quite well. And I printed these two on 2 different printers, laser and inkjet, because these labels apparently will not work with laser. They might. I mean, I don't know. The toner would probably stick to it. I just don't want it gumming up my printer, so I didn't bother trying. It would be an interesting experiment if I had a shitty printer that I didn't care if I destroyed. Like, I don't know if this label's going to melt inside the printer. So yeah. Anyway, there we go. Some very sloppy holes cut out. But like I said, does not matter. And now, inserting components, I guess. I'll put this on here so I can drop the components in without hitting the desk. So here's just a simple lighted power switch. It's got 2 poles. It's got the 1 pole for on and off, and then this, oh my god, 2 connections that are switched connections, and then 1 connection for the, I'm assuming it's a neon indicator that's inside of here to provide a common for that. And that presses in quite nicely. This is my favorite part, inserting the components. It's like playing with a giant Lego set or something of your own design. Circuit breaker. I'm just thinking, one thing that I didn't really take into account when designing this, you can see that the labeling here on each end is intended to represent the power cord coming in and out of it, because on one side it's going to get power in from this remote shutoff box, and on the other side is just going to have a regular ass socket, which, if I could find it, well, you know what a socket looks like. Yeah, it'll be just basically this on the other end of it, sticking out, just so I can plug a power supply or anything else I want to test into that. and the yellow is supposed to represent neutral, and the blue is supposed to represent live. I explained this in the last stream, and I'll definitely explain this in the edited video, but I know damn well that blue and yellow, well, blue is standard in North America, not standard, but it's acceptable in North America for a live conductor, for a current carrying conductor. Well, not the neutral isn't, the neutral is, but anyway, but for a live conductor, blue is acceptable. Yellow is also acceptable for a live conductor, never acceptable for a grounded conductor like the neutral wire. But in this case, I am using those two colors because I'm reserving red and, more importantly, black for the low voltage DC side. So, for example, in North America, black is the appropriate color for the live conductor, but it's also obviously the common color for the negative connection on a DC circuit. So when I have banana plugs all along here for live, if these were all black, and then I had a low voltage box, which I have yet to build, and it also has banana plugs in red and black for DC, and I have black cables, black patch cables coming off of both of these, it would be all too easy to accidentally connect this black post to that black post, line voltage AC to a random ass DC box, and whatever this is connected to, and cause potentially a huge electrocution hazard, because I wouldn't be very wary of the black conductors, because that would be low voltage negative by standard. So this way I know whenever I see blue and yellow, it's going to be line voltage, and whenever I see red and black in this configuration, it's going to be low voltage. And I theoretically could have done it the other way around, but of course, if I'm using a benchtop power supply, or my benchtop load more specifically, I suppose, when testing power supplies, that's going to have a red and black connection on it also, and again, I don't want to feed 120 volts AC into my DC load, which is relatively expensive and I do not want to destroy. Anyway, the whole point of that was that this is supposed to represent the incoming power, which is going to be centered on the box, as one would assume. So I have to put this cable retention grommet. That's not what why? Cable gland. I always call it a grommet. It's a gland. Damn it. Anyway, this is going to go here. You can see if the circuit breaker is there, this is going to be about there and conflict with it. So what I'm probably just going to end up doing is offsetting this slightly from center, which, you know, I'm not terribly OCD, but that is going to bug me a little bit. And the circuit breaker, I think, is just a little too deep where it might interfere. I'm thinking if I put it this, if I orient it that way, I can probably squeeze the wires past it, but I'd rather just turn it the other way and offset it, I think. It's not a decision I absolutely have to finalize yet, because I have yet to cut holes in the bottom of the box. But, yeah. I think I'll orient it this way. That is cross-threaded. Gird, there we go. Of course, as soon as I took it off camera. Okay. It's reasonably well tightened down. Should I tighten it down until I... Yeah, you know what? The fuck don't I have a good pair of pliers over here? Man, I am not prepared at all. And again, if you're watching this video before any of my other videos, I apologize for the background noise. Eventually, and by eventually I mean very eventually, I'm going to build a partition wall behind me between where I am right now and the servers. And it'll cut down most of the noise, if not all of it. Well, certainly not all of it, but most of it. But that is a project and a half. So for now, especially when live streaming or doing a quick video, that droning noise is in the background. I hate it too. But hey, I have to listen to it 24/7. You at most have to listen to it for the rest of the stream, and if you don't like the stream, I guess you don't have to listen to it at all anymore. Okay, so here's the, this is an indicator LED that's going to show input power from the upstream shutoff box. So that's actually going to be before this switch in the circuit. So whenever the power is coming in here, that LED will be on. It's shown as being wired prior to the circuit breaker. I think I am going to actually do that. Yeah, probably, because there is still a circuit breaker here in case that decides to go crazy. It's just to help diagnostically, so I know if this light is on and this won't turn on, then it's probably the breaker is faulty or there's something disconnected in the interim. Anyway, there's also going to be 2 indicator LEDs on the outside, on the output side. Problem is, I drilled this hole way too big. So, for example, for the LED, that it would just fall right through. This slightly lighter colored washer, lighter than the rest of this assembly, is a split ring washer. It's the only kind I had that would fit around this and also not be gigantic. This is now going to fill in the difference on that hole, and I think it looks fine. It doesn't look great, but it's acceptable. The problem is I want them all to look the same, so I'm going to end up putting a washer below all of them, even when they're not necessary, because that would fit in there quite nicely, because that hole is the correct size. So this is basically just a decorative washer in all cases except the one I fucked up. And that's kind of unfortunate. It covers the word input a little bit because I obviously spaced out this labeling for the original component. You know what I'm going to do? On this side of the board, I'm just going to mount the component by itself. And then for these two, they'll have washers. So it'll still, these two will at least look the same, even if this one will look different to those. I think I'd rather have that than have that labeling obscured. I don't know. It's all trade-offs. And I'm going to try to avoid as much soldering as possible, not because I don't like soldering, but because, like with any project I make, I'll probably eventually want to reconfigure this or add the feature of some kind. And all these have these nice spade connectors on them anyway, so I might as well leverage those wherever possible. I will have to I will have to solder tails onto these LEDs though, because these terminals are really only for soldering. I shouldn't say only, it's not like there's a rule about it, but I definitely do not have anything to connect onto those that's that small. And I'm pretty sure they're just begging for solder. By the way, these are not just plain LEDs. In fact, no, I'm pretty sure they are supposed to be LEDs and not neon indicators when I bought them. But they're rated 110 volts AC, so they must have a resistor and perhaps even a diode in there. Probably not a diode, probably just a resistor. They probably just use the LED as the diode, because it is a diode. So yeah, these split ring washers I bent to flatten them out. So they're no longer split ring, they're just washers. They're just ring. And then also these on the end here got a little close to the edge of the box, so I channeled that out. That's fine because that's only used for waterproofing. A gasket would go in this lip, and then there's a little raised portion here along the edge that would supposedly seat into that gasket and supposedly keep it watertight, waterproof. I don't know what their intent is. I don't intend for it to be water anything. If water gets anywhere near this, I'm screwed regardless, so I'm just going to assume that water is never going to get near this. I really need a better pair of pliers than I mean, this is a good pair of pliers, but better for this task, because this is going to be asinine to have to do it this way, although this is really the only type of component that's not going to be hand tightenable. That's fine. I mean, it works. It's not sexy, but it works. Just like me. Now this one is the one with the hole that's too big, so I have 2 washers, one for the top, one for the bottom. The only thing I'm worried about is the thickness. It's very close to me not being able to actually get the nut on the back of this once both washers are stacked onto it. But we'll see what happens. Like, I tested it out last night when I was bending these washers up, and, you know, searching for the correct washer. Now here's the thing, I think it's gonna get low enough, it's just the split ring washers, because I bent them, they're not perfectly flat. And the problem is to compress them enough to actually get bite onto the threads. I would have to, well, I'd want to use the threads to compress them, or use the nut to compress them, by leveraging use of the threads. This is really making me regret messing that up. I mean, this one's not too bad, but it's definitely not sitting flat. You know what I'm going to do? Let me get a hammer and just give it a few swift whacks on a flat floor. And then it'll hopefully flatten out enough to get that nut on there. And then once the nut grabs onto the threads, I'm all set. This is riveting streaming content, I know. I'm sorry. I mean, I'm not really sorry. I guess you don't have to watch it. You can shut it off. Yeah. I mean, it did something. I don't know that necessarily made them flatter, but I'm going to stack them up and then pound them. I don't know why that's a better idea. Well, let me see. It's also not like I'm hitting them on a fucking anvil. I'm hitting them on a very thin vinyl floor on top of concrete. And I want to do it on the concrete itself, lest I chip the concrete, but this one's still a little out of whack. Just be a little more subtle with it. Anyway, I'm back. Yeah, it's looking better. Now I should do that in the shot of the camera, huh? Obviously I got new pliers recently. I mean, these are perfectly fine. They served me well for many years, but I wanted the better insulation on the handles. Because very recently I cut through a live wire with these wire strippers / cutters. And it's like, you know what, if I'm going to end up doing stupid ass shit like that, it was by accident. I mean, I wasn't like, oh, yeehaw, let me electrocute myself. But it's one of those accidents that could very easily turn either extremely painful or fatal. And I mean, just from a general, like, PSA standpoint, insulated pliers and screwdrivers are not an excuse to work with live wires. You know, they're like a protection of last resort. It's like just in case. There we go, that bit down. Like, don't trust your life to pliers just because they have some insulation on them. Still ways you can become dead. In fact, I mean, yeah, I guess, you know, a lot of people would say, I need better pliers than this. A lot of people would say you shouldn't fuck around with line voltage electricity at all, and I shouldn't even be building a box like this in the first place. And of course I see the point. I'm not disagreeing that it's, you know, it would be safer for me not to do it. That's obviously true, but I don't know, as long as you don't do anything too stupid. What are going to be, I mean, needle nose pliers are always good. If I had a really deep socket, it would actually fit over that. Why do I have two identical pairs of Irwin wire cutters? It's fucking weird. I don't know where that second one even came from. I do have like a what is it, like a problem with tools. I have too many of them. No. Those are coax crimpers. When was the last time I crimped a coax connector? Probably 15 years ago. See, I don't think an open-ended wrench is going to fit in here. Maybe. Oh, that's in there pretty good. I mean, the split ring washers are helping to keep it from rotating or anything. So there we go. I mean, not ideal, not exactly the overall look I was going for, but yeah, it works. Okay, so I got these cheap little volt and amp meters off of eBay or Amazon, I forget which. Very inexpensive. I like them. They look cool. I wouldn't trust them for accuracy worth a damn, and they're definitely not precise. I think volts goes down to 0 decimal places, and amps maybe has 1 decimal place. And I mean, I've used these before, and they are very inaccurate. Is this not? How is this not the? That's definitely meant to go with that. What the fuck? Oh, also, there is apparently a washer that I lost because this has one. Here it is. Again, not for water tightness, but that just helps to compress, sort of hold the nut in place and keep this from rotating and or loosening up. Get that as plumb as possible. There we go. And also because it's so cheap and it's line voltage, I mean, I wouldn't trust it in like any real serious application. Because, you know, it's one of those things that it could go on fire. So the voltmeter obviously just takes 2 inputs, which is going to be live and neutral to get the voltage. This takes 2 inputs, live and neutral, to power it, and then it has a toroidal coil that attaches this nice connector, and obviously, in this case, the live will be passing through this, although it could be the neutral, but, I mean, it could be the ground if I want to see if any significant current's leaking the ground, but if any amount of current's leaking the ground that this was capable of measuring it, then I would have a huge problem, because we're not talking milliamps, we're talking at least 1/10 of an amp, which is milliamps, I guess, but you know what I mean. Like if you have more than a couple of milliamps leaking the ground, then that's really not good. If you have more than, you know, millivolts leaking the ground, it's not good. Or milliamps, or, I mean, microamps. Jesus. But, you know. Some milliamps aren't going to hurt. These will just hand tighten. I mean, I don't think, it's just plastic. Don't want to overstrain the threads. Okay, well that's good enough. Banana posts. Dun, 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 dun. Banana posts. They're not actually banana posts, they're more like banana sockets. Because they don't have they're not screw terminals. So we're going to go blue again. That indicates live in this wacky world of ours. Yellow is for neutral. And green I wouldn't fuck with. Green is always ground. I mean, in building wiring, certainly, well, in the United States anyway, or probably anywhere green is ground. You never want to fuck with that and make green a live conductor, because that's going to eventually bite you or someone else in the ass. And by the ass, I mean all over your body, and by bite, I mean electrocute. Or shock, really, you know, whatever. I mean, I shouldn't even be fucking around with making yellow the neutral, but, you know. What's the downside of it? I mean, I guess if you went to this box and you expected yellow to be live, because that's the standard color for a live or hot or whatever conductor here in the States, and you didn't get any current out of it because you know, you connected it to some kind of thing that you need to power or test, it wouldn't be the worst disaster. I mean, it's probably more of an issue if you use a color that should be neutral or ground for live, because then someone would expect it to be to have 0 volts relative to Earth, and instead it has, you know, 120 volts AC relative to Earth, or relative to ground. I've been watching too much Big Clive. It's the little things. You watch enough YouTube videos, like, I started calling, well, I mean, what the hell do we call it in English? I mean, in English, in America anyway. Like in the UK, they call it the mains, for the line voltage power supply that comes into your home, and it gets distributed throughout your home. I just call it line voltage, I guess. Oh, it's just tight. There we go. I like how this is actually fitting next to these LEDs, though. That's a really tight tolerance right there. Kind of lucked out on that. And then these have notches on either side to tighten them. Like, let me show you the nuts. See, they're keyed there, as opposed to having like a knurled or textured exterior, or like a hexagonal shape. And I'm figuring the best way to tighten them down is just going to be put the prongs of my needle nose pliers in there. And the problem is the whole connector is twisting. That's not